Okay, well, here we are. Yeah, I got caught in a snowstorm. It's okay. It was chilly this morning, so I dressed fairly appropriately. But right now, it's just too much. So I'm going to hurry up and try to read these next two chapters. We're going to do two, 9 and 10 right now, and then we'll see what goes on. Hopefully, I can stay out here this long. It's going to get cold. It's getting colder faster all the time. Okay, so I better get into it here. We know that the last thing that happened was that Kimba had a little campfire. He spent the night after he found the trail of the mighty ones, and happily, luckily, the dog kind of befriended Kimba and was able to kind of protect him during the night so he can sleep, because the thing your body needs most is good sleep. Okay, so let's get going on this chapter 9. The next day dawned chilly and bleak. The sun was so pale it seemed to be draining away into invisibility. Kimba's breath frosted in the air, something it had not done since the earth entered the thawing season the full course of a moon ago. Kimba picked up the trail of the One Tusk with no trouble. As he followed it, the dog made its usual wide-ranging excursions. Its flanks were streaked and dried with dried blood from the battle with the wolf. Remember when the dog killed the wolf, and then Kimba got the carcass and cut it up, roasted it, and ate it. Fed some of it to the dog, too. There would be new scars on that tough body, but the animal moved with fluid grace and suppleness. Head high, as though it had not suffered so much as a scratch. This was land Kimba had never before seen in his travels with the tribe. His eyes skipped over it, and he fixed every feature in his mind. Now he must not be the dreamer that Utrecht said he was. He must know exactly how to make his way back. The great meadows continued to spread before him, slanting upward to yellow limestone cliffs. Marshy grass, some of it up to his chest, carpeted much of these long stretches. There were times when he could not see the dog, but he could tell where it was by the movement of the grass. In low-lying areas, the grass thinned to a few rank weeds sprouting out of black, muddy bogs. Kimba avoided these carefully. They were unpleasant to walk in, and occasionally the clinging muck was strong enough to hold a hunter or even a large animal immobile, as honey could trap a fly. Mud bogs or even quicksand is kind of in this area. The track of the mighty one remained easy to follow. The grass was crushed flat where it had passed with its herd. It could not be far now, Kimba felt. The One Tusk would not be hurrying. It would not know it had such a persistent pursuer in Kimba, and Kimba's the persistent pursuer. The day did not warm up as it should, and dark purple clouds formed in the sky where the sun would be setting. While the shadows of afternoon were still short, Kimba knelt by a shallow, sluggish creek and drank deeply. Beside him, the dog dipped its muzzle in the cold water, then looked up, snuffling. The hackles on its back rose. Kimba stared along the dog's line of vision, down the long flow of grassy plain. Something moved, some creature or other. Then he saw more movement. There were many of them, whatever they were. One of the creatures stepped onto the slight rise, and Kimba knew what they were, although he had never before seen them. The others. They called them the others. He threw himself down out of sight. The hunters had told him of this breed. They had warned him that there was nothing more dangerous to face. For the others were much like Kimba and the members of his tribe. They walked on two legs. They spoke among themselves. They carried weapons, which they made, and they knew the secret of producing fire. So they're not Australopithecines, because they can make their own tools. They're not Homo habilis because they can make their own fire. So we have to kind of think, what could they be? They are a type of hominid that's different from Kimba's tribe. But they were squat and hairy, with flattened heads and beetling brows. They moved in a shambling fashion, swiftly but bent over and furtive. They were powerful in combat, although they had to move in close to deal with their enemies with spears or knives because they did not have knowledge of the use of the throwing sticks. Remember, throwing sticks make a javelin go farther, kind of like the when you have a extension for a tennis ball and you see people do that. Same idea. And they had a fierce hatred for beings like those of Kimba's tribe. The others were near the mammoth's trail. Kimba counted 7 of them. He began to make a slow, careful arc, hoping to cross the trail further ahead. He snaked along on hands and knees, stopping often to peer over the top of the high grass. The others were hunting, Kimba saw. Game would have been hard for them to find, too. In a thicket of tangled bushes, Kimba was able to stand without being seen. The others he observed were moving in his direction. They beat the ground, hoping to stir some small animal into flight and expose itself to their spears and clubs. And they grubbed in the earth for seeds or pods, small lizards or insects to eat. Suddenly the wind shifted. It was stronger and colder, and now it was blowing toward the others. Kimba wondered if it would carry his scent to them, because he had never encountered these beings before. He did not know what they were capable of, and this further increased his fear. The hunters had told him that the battle cry of the others was more terrifying than any other charging creatures. They said that their stumpy legs were tireless and swift. He must leave this place. He motioned to the dog. "Come," he called. It was the first time he had spoken to the animal. Chapter 10. Keeping low, Kimba continued to make a wide loop through the spongy sea of grass. When, at last, he dared look up, the others were nowhere to be seen. But the wind had intensified. It was as frigid and cutting as it had been during the winter days when the tribe stayed within the cave. Kimba shivered. The big dog sniffed the air uncertainly. The sky was even darker now and more ominous, although nightfall was still far off. He must rediscover the trail before the storm struck. The huge prints of the One Tusk had to be nearby, he was sure, but the light was growing misty. Kimba squinted, his eyes sweeping back and forth. He trotted faster, moving his arms briskly to keep warm. The first snowflakes began drifting down. Never had he known it to snow this late in the year. The season of cold and snow and scarcity already was a lengthy one, but now it seemed to be extending its grip even further. Why this was so, only one as wise as Utrecht could explain, Kimba thought. But Kimba did not know that he had to find the trail. But Kimba did know that he had to find the trail of the One Tusk before it was entirely covered in snow. He ran harder, peering through the white haze, knowing that his frantic efforts might very well be carrying him farther away from the trail. But he was ridden by the urgency of his quest. Soon the ground would be nothing but a blur. He spotted a series of wide indentations in the earth. Examining them, he decided they were the tracks of a woolly rhinoceros. When he looked up, the dog was no longer visible. Above him was a vastness of white, slowly and perpetually descending, kind of like where I am right now. Very similar. Even doubled over, Kimba could scarcely see the ground. Something erupted in front of him, an explosive flapping. He stumbled back and saw the object, brown and yellow, quickly disappear. It had been a large bird nesting in some bushes. If he could not see the bird before almost stepping on it, he knew he would probably not detect the One Tusk's footprints unless he actually fell into one. There was no purpose in continuing. He had to find shelter until the snowfall ended. You could die out here. Luckily, I know where my cabin is. It's not far. Apprehension filled him. During the season of cold and snow, the tribe always stayed in its cave. He had never been caught in a snowstorm alone, never before faced the prospect of spending the night out in one. And I'm going to tell you, you can't. You'll get hypothermia and die. If I go to try to lay down here and try to sleep, I wouldn't make it in the morning. He called the dog, shouting, "Hoo!" woo, as the hunters did when they were cut off from view of each other and wanted to communicate. He waited, hearing nothing but the droning rasp of the wind. The snow blinded him now. Everywhere he turned, it was like a gigantic white pelt suffocating him. Again, he shouted to the dog until his lungs were emptied of air. Again, nothing answered. He was not sure why he called the dog, but it seemed important that the animal be with him now. It seemed important that he not be alone at a time of such great danger. Lurching about, he put the lashing wind to his back. He knew there were no protective caves or even large boulders in this region of flatlands and grass. There was nothing but the wind and the snow and the ever fiercer cold. You guys, I'm going to guess, you're going to think you've been cold. You've never really truly been cold. Very few people ever experience that kind of cold like he's going to have to experience or is experiencing right now. His chilled hands were losing all feeling. He rubbed them together vigorously, flexing his fingers. There was a painful tingling in them now, but he knew that in this wind, it would not be long until they froze. His thoughts flew to Utrecht's hand and those missing 2 fingers. Had the cold and not some mortal enemy been responsible? Kimba folded his arms over his chest, tucking his hands under his armpits. He helped some, but his whole body was shaking uncontrollably. Should he call the dog once more? The boy wondered, but his breath was short. He could not suck in enough of the frigid air to utter a shout. Above the keening of the wind, he heard it then, 2 sharp bursts of sound. It was the bark of a wolf or a dog. Kimba faced into the wind, hurrying toward the sound. The barking seemed closer, and then it ceased. Kimba reached up and touched a coat of snow-covered fur. It was the wild dog, so he found it. He put an arm around the animal, drawing near to feel the warmth of its body, but the dog pulled away. Kimba rose to his feet and stumbled after it. The sharp fear seized him that the dog might vanish once more, and this time he would never find it. But the animal had halted. Kimba rushed up to it, and then he saw what was stretched out on the ground, a large roebuck, its magnificent antlers almost covered by snow. The animal, or the dog, must just have brought it down. For the stag's flanks were still warm, and there was a gaping wound where the dog had paused to feed. The boy knew what to do. Though sometimes he let his mind wander, he had listened carefully to the hunter's stories. With his knife, he cut a slit along the stag's belly. He dug out the entrails clumsily, all his guts, the stomach and the intestines and all that stuff. Dug out the entrails clumsily, for he was unskilled at this sort of job, and his hands were all but frozen. It was a gory task, but he was not squeamish. He and the members of the tribe had great respect for the beasts they killed. It was a feeling of kinship. All shared life, Utrecht had said. Both the people of the tribe and the animals they pursued were the magic carriers of life. And when the hunters killed an animal, it was as if its life became theirs. So the hunters killed without regret and had no time for delicacy. Their need was far too strong. Brother, I thank you for this shelter, Kimba silently told the roebuck. He climbed into the still steaming carcass. If you've ever seen Star Wars, which one was it? The Empire Strikes Back, where I guess it's Luke, one of his things died, or I can't remember if it's Han Solo or Luke, but they cut open that thing that runs around, looks like a 2-legged giant llama, and then they got inside of it because they were freezing. This is the same thing. He found a roebuck that the dog killed, and then he cut it open, took out all the guts, and went inside of it. He climbed into the still steaming carcass. There was room for the dog to crouch beside him. Huddled together, they let the stag's hide serve as their tent, and the ribs and everything else. They were cold, but not so agonizingly cold as they had been. The wind picked up, but they were out of reach of its wicked and biting edge. Tight against the dog, Kimba tried to forget his discomfort by concentrating on the One Tusk. All traces of the mammoth's passing would be concealed beneath the snow. They might veer off in any direction. Where was he to start looking in the morning? Now it's going to be covered in snow. Behind his closed eyes, he let his mind go blank, as Utrecht had taught him. At first, it was not easy, for images of the storm, Rab's plight, and the dog all appeared in rapid succession. It was as though these images were in a race to gain his attention. Then calm prevailed, and with it a sense of moving swiftly through space. He felt detached from the body that was shivering within the frozen remains of a roebuck on a desolate, snow-choked night. Instead, he felt free, dimly conscious only of what Utrecht had tried to convey to him. We must know deeply those we hunt. Know them outside and inside. We must become them. He no longer felt free. Rather, he became aware of a sense of confinement. Confinement within a body that was lumbering, powerful, huge. He could see, but his vision was not sharp. His hearing was keen, and his sense of smell was acute. There was a strong odor all about him. It was the easily recognizable reek of the mighty ones. Now, are the mighty ones near him while he's in this roebuck's body? No, this is his mind. It's like a dream. It's kind of like a dream or a vision. He's becoming, in his vision, one of the mighty ones. Ahead of him marched the One Tusk. Behind him, he heard the grunts of the other mighty ones. He was one with them. The heat of the sun felt good on his flanks and broad back. They were headed toward a plateau, rearing up out of the snow-covered flats. There would be more foliage there. Green and tender shoots were budding on the trees, along a small stream that trickled through the land ahead. His eyesight swam when he peered into the far distance, but he could make out one distinctive feature. It was a triangular notch cut into the square-shaped top of the distant plateau. Remember plateau, flat-topped rock, or I'm sorry, flat-topped mountain? Well, there's a little triangular notch in it, and it has a little stream coming out of it. Okay. It was toward this pass that the One Tusk led the herd. The trunk of the One Tusk was never still. It tested the air, it scoured the ground, it sucked up snow, it tore up whatever was edible beneath the crust. The One Tusk turned, and the tiny reddened eyes, all but hidden under the overhanging brow, surveyed the herd, assuring itself that all were still obediently following. The herd felt fear. Kimba awoke with a sneeze. His face was pressed into the dog's soggy neck. He ached from the cold, and his arms and legs were stiff, but it was morning, and the storm had ended. As the boy stretched, the dog wiggled out of the makeshift shelter. Kimba followed, blinking in the weak sunshine. The land was an unbroken sheet of glistening white. Had it been the power he experienced during the night, placing him among the One Tusk's herd, or had it only been a dream? Or was there a difference? He was only mildly hungry. Anyway, the cold had turned the stag's flesh into the hardness of a rock, and Kimba was in too great a hurry to build a fire. If it had been a dream, its impact was not dwindling. What he had seen and smelled and felt remained vivid in his mind. The herd had been traveling roughly in the direction of the Forbidden Mountains. Remember your map? And the sun had been to his left. Kimba shaded his eyes and slowly scanned the horizon. The Forbidden Mountains were a gray, jagged smudge against the sky. Between them and where he stood were a large number of limestone cliffs. They were of various heights and shapes, and he knew that some of the closer ones blocked his view of those that lay beyond. He was bothered by the glare of the sun on the snow, but then excitement burst out of him in a sudden cry. There! It was a triangular-shaped notch in the level silhouette of a high plateau. The thing he dreamed about last night, he now sees in the morning. It was as he had seen it during the strange experience he had had during the night. There need be no more questioning about which way to proceed. The next leg of his journey was clearly laid out for him, and it was not a long one. He would face the One Tusk this very day. Kimba and the dog set off at once toward the notched plateau. They moved swiftly, letting exertion warm their chilled bodies. Before the morning was half over, Kimba detected a series of dents in the snow. They were the prints of the Mighty One. With his spear, Kimba drew in the snow a picture of a mammoth with one tusk. Hopping from foot to foot, he danced around the Mighty One. His voice grew louder and louder and seemed to him to come from some source other than his own body. He's kind of emulating the summoning rite to summon animals like Utrecht had done. The picture of the Mighty One became a blur as he whirled around it. The trunk, the swollen head, the monstrous body, the ugly eyes, that lone tusk. There was the enemy. There was the creature that stood between Rab and life. With a yell, he hurled his spear into the snow. It sank deep into the mammoth's side. Kimba yanked the spear out and waved it. Now he would meet the One Tusk. Now at last he would be a hunter. Now he would do what must be done to save Rab. And that's it. Okay, guys, it is really starting to get cold out here. I am going to go back to my cabin, and then we will read tomorrow, and we'll take care of all that. You guys have a great day. Stay warm. Well, it's probably easier for you to stay warm than for me, but I'll stay warm. I'm going to go start a fire in my cabin. I won't light my cabin on fire, just in the wooden stove, or the stove. They have a wood burning stove in there. All right. We'll see you guys tomorrow. Have a great day.